Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alexander Petrie from AA Entertainment, and this week I'll be giving you my top 10 favorite horror films, or perhaps what I consider to be the top 10 most influential horror films of all time. And I just have to say, I really had to do this because our producer, Tanner Bushman, and my co-star, Andrew Raphael, do not like horror, and I do not see why. I think horror is such an influential genre, and is so, oddly enough, it has such a wide range, whether it be comedy, horror, drama horror, or what's what I'm looking for? Abstract horror, you know what I'm talking about. And on an even more personal note, growing up, I've always been into horror films and horror literature. As a matter of fact, the films that got me into the film, that sparked my love for film were horror films, the old Universal horror classics. And from then on, I started watching more and more movies of that type. And still to this day, I love horror films and even horror literature. I even go on YouTube and watch Mr. Nightmare religiously, to the point I walk around the house with a kitchen knife, scared for my own life. But anyways, here's my top 10 list. And to play it safe, I will start from the bottom. Dracula from 1931, starring Bela Lugosi.
I bid you welcome.
This was the first film. No, this was one of the first films that I saw, but this was the first film that made me admire the art of filmmaking. I'm not sure if I love telling the story. My father passed away when I was 2 years old, and ever since then I did a lot of, I helped my mom around the house a lot. And we came across a box of my dad's old videotapes. One of them was Dracula from 1931. So she said, "Do you want to take a break and watch a movie?" I said, "Sure." We watched it, and this film just was a real trip for me. I loved it, and I love it to this day. I even had the honors of seeing it on the big screen with Fathom events. And just the whole film is directed by one of the greatest directors of all time, Todd Browning. The whole film, even though it's not 100% faithful to its source material, it is, like I said, it's a real trip. The whole film has the atmosphere of a nightmare. Like, you're not necessarily staying dead right in his face. It's like slowly drilling its way into your subconscious. It's instilling this fear in you, like a little at a time, like you're trapped inside this nightmare. And it's just, you're in a whole nother world. It's an excellent film. For number 9, I chose Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it is, again, I consider this to be one of the greatest horror films of all time, as not only does it take the best elements from old school horror but also modern day horror. And first off, the graininess of the grainy quality of the film is very nightmare inducing. The lack of a soundtrack and just the sounds they use are very nightmare inducing. The whole film really feels like you're watching a snuff film, or you're actually walking around barefoot in Ed Gein's house. And also the cinematography, despite the grainy quality, the cinematography is just mind-boggling, and I think those two combined make it one of the most epic horror films. House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. My mom got this for me for my birthday one year, and it scared the hell out of me. And and I consider it one of my favorites. It was the first horror film that truly terrified me, and it was also the first one that it was also one of the first examples of sexual appeal in a horror film that I've ever seen, even though it was a blonde-haired woman walking down the steps in her nightgown. But to me, to an 8-year-old, that's like a Hustler magazine. And also it's from one of the greatest horror directors of all time, the schlock master, William Castle.
You'll see human heads without bodies.
This next one, The Monster from 1925, starring one of the greatest horror icons to this day, Lon Chaney Sr. This film is highly underrated. I saw it on Turner Classic Movies a few years back. Then I bought it on DVD. The whole film, it's a comedy horror. I think it's leaning more towards a comedy, and it's a silent film, and I feel as though it's corny. It's a little drawn out, and the elements of horror are very simple, which I think all that combined make it into one of the most terrifying films ever made. I watch it to this day, and it's still 10 times scarier than any other film I've seen, whether it be Carl Theodore Meyer's Vampire or any of the Saw films. Just, it's about a mad doctor starring Lon Chaney, and this detective who's investigating this abandoned asylum. And again, if it's simple elements, it's very nightmare-inducing, and I love it. Suspiria from one of the greatest. Again, I say this with a lot of people, but again, one of the greats, Dario Argento, Suspiria from 1977. This film is very hard to sit through at first. The entire film is a supernatural trip. The set designs feel like you're swimming in an ocean of glass shards or razors, and the soundtrack is like, again, it just grabs your brain, it digs its nails into your brain, and it just shakes it around. And the storyline, it's very, again, it's not like you have an issue, we're gonna tackle this issue and here's the outcome. It's like it's just a series of overwhelming, unusual events slowly unraveling until it ends up in the most unusual places, and just watching it's very emotionally overwhelming, and I love it. Phantom of the Opera from 1925, starring again Lon Chaney Sr. It's, to this day, it's one of the most groundbreaking films. It's more groundbreaking than Cabin in the Woods, Hostel, Saw, Insidious, The Conjuring. This film is pure genius. It's, again, the set designs, the story, the makeup, the cinematography. It's way ahead of its time. It's way ahead of our time, and again, it opens up so many doors. Some doors which you get a glimpse at, others which are just open, and it's up to you to decide what looks beyond the darkness. And superb acting, wonderful acting. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, considered to be the first official horror film. It's again from one of my favorite film movements of all time, the German Expressionist movement. It also has perhaps the first plot twist of all time, which I will not give away. It's very again, the whole film is a very unusual trip. It's like looking straight into a nightmare, and it opened up many doors for future horror films and also the styles of many future film directors, most notably Tim Burton. Next up, we have Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby is filmed by Roman Polanski. I know I talk about this a lot, and believe me, if you watched it, you know why I talk about it a lot. The whole film, again, it's like you're in the mind of this woman. The whole film, from start to finish, it's like you're living inside a nightmare. And it also and again, it has a very generic, cliched plot. A woman who was impregnated by Satan must give birth to Satan's baby. But throughout the film, you don't know what to believe in or what not to believe in. But the way Roman Polanski handles this is in the most unusual way, in the most unique way, which is what makes it so special. Get Out. I love this film. I have to mention this one because I feel I do not like modern day horror films. Only these few independent horror films, and very few that actually surprised me. Get Out is one of the most groundbreaking horror films of today. It's definitely something we needed. It totally rejuvenated the horror genre, and hell, even as a white person, this film is very overwhelming and terrifying. And it's just, you walk in there not knowing what to expect. Even though he didn't know what to expect, throughout the film, director Jordan Peele just takes your expectations and completely fucks with them. He completely likes to mess with your mind throughout this film, and it is pure genius. And last but not least, my favorite horror film of all time, The Haunting, from 1963, based off of the novel from one of the greatest horror novelists of all time, Shirley Jackson. The Haunting it's Shirley. I watched this film countless times. One of the most terrifying films you'll ever see. For one thing, I remember when I was much younger, I was home alone. My mother and my sister went shoe shopping, and it was nighttime. I was on school night, so I'm working on some homework, and it's on TV. And out of nowhere, I'm just stuck. I'm watching the opening scenes, and I'm just stuck. I'm glued to the screen. And then the TV has one of those alarms. They have like this major broadcast. They have to interrupt this interrupting broadcast, and they say there's this killer on the loose who's kidnapping children, and this is all true. So I remember just hiding underneath the kitchen counter till my mother and my sister got home. It was one of the most terrifying moments and one of the funniest moments I can remember. But anyways, the whole film is incredibly atmospheric, and not only do you sympathize with the lead protagonist, she's one of the most sympathetic film characters ever to be put on screen, but also you feel like her as well. So on one hand, you want to hug her so she can cry on your shoulders, but on the other hand, you want to cry on her shoulders. The whole film is just one big nightmare, and I highly recommend it. Thank you very, very much for watching. This has been AA Top 10, and we hope to see you at the movies.